Yeah. So, tell me more about you, kind of how you got to be a founder to begin with.
There's two answers to that. One is that I think it was always in my blood. Like if I look at my childhood, some of my tendencies, we talk about some rules that founders are probably more prone to break in life. I think that there's a high correlation between what I look like as a middle school, high schooler, and then becoming a founder. When I actually became a founder for the first time, it was more accidental than that. It was a I quit, you're fired conversation with my boss. And I spent 2 years working directly for the CEO there and learned everything I didn't want to do if I got the opportunity to have my own business. And so when I found myself out on my own, not by my choice, decided to give it a shot to stay out on my own. I didn't even know I was becoming a founder. I really just wanted to be a solopreneur, a consultant, doing what I did. I was like, man, if I could work for myself and make what I was making, that would be the dream. That was as big as my ambition was at the time. But I just kept needing help, kept growing. And that's when I found myself needing to figure out how to go from a founder to a leader. And they're very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the first company that you founded?
A company called iSpeak. It's still around today. We merged in 2015 with a company named Syrup. So syrupmarketing.com, still around. They do wonderful, wonderful work. It's
Mhm.
your first company is kind of like your baby, I think. So super proud and like still a shining star in my quiver. And some of the stuff along the way after that, you mentioned, the system and soul is my 10th. Some of those were anywhere from passive investor to uh, more active, like strategic investor kind of a thing. Some of those I was involved with, some of them I totally weren't. So it's probably a bit of a stretch to say that. Don't want to give the misconception, but yeah, there at the beginning, very good at the start. I think I love the start, the 0 to 1. That's probably my favorite, most energizing phase. And that's where that founder energy really, really lives. And most founders never get over that gap between being a renegade founder and a renegade leader.
hmm Yeah, you say no founder escapes the moment in their business when they realize what they used to do back then won't work to get them where they want to go. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, some of that's an internal struggle because who they were has to change. But what we argue for in this book is that the world is telling us we need to go from like renegade founder to this grown up, mature version of ourselves, more mature founder kind of version. And or like drop the founder. That's something that happened at a specific date and time. It's not a role within the organization, but there is a role, there is a need for a leader. And at the same time, we don't need you to lose your renegade energy. So how do you make a few shifts with how you're bringing that renegade energy on behalf of the organization? The where it hurts the most for most entrepreneurs is they get to a place where the people that got them there aren't the ones that are going to get them to the next level. And it's not necessarily that they have to go or leave. What tends to happen is you take the the best person that happens to be around at the moment and you elevate them into a place of leadership or even management or whatever. And then you get to the place where you need professional leadership, professional management in the organization, and they may not be the best person suited for that role. And they're not the person that's going to go build a team. They're not the person that you can fully delegate that function of the business, because the only way they were capable of running it is if that founder was holding their hand. And that's not scalable. And so, in order to get that founder out of the middle of the mess, they've got to have a team of people that can each own that function of the business without being, babysat.
So you've mentioned already, we've talked about Renegades, the book. So what prompted you to write a book? What's the story behind the story there?
A lot of encouragement from friends and peers, some of the other coaches that we have in our system, in our framework. And we wrote I wrote this very tightly with Mackenzie, who you know, and we wrote it 2 or 3 times and then like walked away from it, came back, and I would look at it and go, it's not bad, but I would feel bad for anybody who had to read this. Like, it was just like the world doesn't need another business book. And about that time, I kind of glanced over at a book on my shelf that has been an inspiration to me, and the way it's written and different, photography and messy lines and different fonts on different pages. And I'm like, you know what? I'm talking about breaking the rules. Let's break the rules. So we rewrote it. And I think the hardest part about the whole book was finding kind of the through line of the whole thing. And once we figured out what we were trying to say there, everything else just fell into place. And as you've seen the book, there's lots of fun and illustration and color. And even what you said in the opening, that's been the most valuable thing, the most rewarding thing for me, is that I think founders are they're being seen in a new way. It's like, oh, somebody sees me. They see my inner world. They understand what's happening in my, business context. And this is actually something that doesn't just skip to the clean answer. It's like, no, we're going to get messy in the middle and figure our way out through it.
Yeah, you mentioned too, there's an abundance of business books that are out there. I am in sort of this world of thought leaders and business
Yeah.
leaders, people that author books. And so I'm always, just because like, hey, I'm going to be promoting a conference where we're going to have 6 of these people talking. Let me get a copy at least of at least one of their books. And I'll tell you too, I agree with the statement. There's a lot of just business books out there that don't do much besides share a concept, right? But I will tell you that one of the reasons that my book came about the way that it did, and I'd already planned to write it, I was just looking for more content. You have an email series called the 261, and I get them and I read them. What's nice about them is that they're not very long emails. You can read it, in just about a minute or less. But you had sent one, gosh, I don't know, at least 6 or more months ago. And you had referenced, of all things, a business book. And remember, I have enough business books. I don't need any more. But you referenced one called The Only Leaders Worth Following. So that's a very
Yeah.
interesting title by Tim Spiker. And so I'm like, you know what? If Benj is going out of his way to recommend this book in one of his emails, I think I'll get a copy and just see what it has to say. And I will tell you that was a very refreshing book because I think it got beyond the cliches. I also got the impression too that Tim Spiker wasn't going out of his way to try to impress the reader. It was just like bare bones. Here's the truth. Let me tell you what nobody else is talking about. This is what you need to understand to be able to understand what leaders are worth following. And so there was a couple of concepts in his book that I've made also the cornerstone of my book too. So you know what you're talking about. But again, because I've also spent 20 years in the book publishing industry, again, I can be very jaded and cynical and like, oh, I've seen this before. I kind of know the formula, right? I can honestly
Yeah.
say, though, your book does not follow any formulas. It is literally breaks the mold. And again, it's very easy to consume and very easy to use. And I just love the fact that it seems like it's not just a book with shared concepts, but it's also like a workbook. Like get in here and get your hands dirty and start working. And so it's very actionable in that
Yeah.
regard.
Thank you, Will.
And we've talked about founders, we've talked about renegades. Why do you call founders renegades, and what does that term mean to you?
Man, I've been getting that question a lot, and I think I'm gonna have to write a piece about the difference between a renegade and a rebel, because I think people use them interchangeably, but um and I'm sure if there's some journalism major out there, they're gonna maybe argue with the semantics of what I'm about to say. But in my mind, a renegade is somebody that's willing to go against the norms, whether it's culture, society, whatever those norms are, for the sake of a higher purpose. They a purpose or a vision of the future that they are determined to make a reality. And so it's just that willingness to break some rules for something bigger. Some people are like, oh, that's a negative term. And I think the negative term is more like rebel, and a rebel's like trying to pick a fight with the opposition. And this is more of an indifference to the norm. It's not trying to pick a fight with the norm. It's just like, hey, the norm may work for a lot of people. Have you heard the expression, like, I'm not trying to do what everybody else does because I don't want to get the outcome that they're all getting. I think that there's that like spirit deep down in the Renegade. There's also a little bit of like, there's all the what ifs in life, and those hold a lot of people back from any kind of entrepreneurial venture. And the the Renegade has a little sense of, but what if I don't? That's their what if. What if I don't try this? What if I don't go for it? What if I don't go all in? What if, sometimes to an extreme of, what if I don't, mortgage my house and say that I put every penny into making this happen that I possibly can. But it's that their what if is driven by a sense of future regret if they don't try.
Mm-hmm. I've seen this spirit, this characteristic, at least in some other founders within their DNA. And one of the expressions I heard someone use once, and it kind of reminds me of what you just said, which is, when everyone else is zigging, I'm going to try zagging. Or you could say the other, if everybody else is zagging, I'm going to try zigging. To me, that kind of encapsulates what you just said.
Yeah.
You touched on this earlier. You were talking about the difference between a renegade founder and a renegade leader, because again, a founder is kind of a moment in time. It's not an ongoing job title. But you also referenced the founder's gap in relation to the difference between the renegade founder and the renegade leader. Talk more about the founder's gap.
Yeah, well, we kind of already did. It's that moment when you're realizing that all the things that were working aren't working anymore. That tends to show up in our personal lives before we realize it is coming from our professional lives. And so we find ourselves in what we call the founder gap. And when we're there, most of us try really hard to just push our way through, like just work harder, like do more of what we're doing. And then we hit another wall where like that absolutely isn't working. And we're faced with two choices. Most of us don't know we have two choices. So we try and be intelligent human beings, and everything that we read out there, like I said earlier, tells us the way that we are supposed to like grow up and become a different person. And most importantly, lose all that renegade energy. And man, companies out there need that renegade energy.
Do you think that the renegade energy, when it is not channeled properly, and what I mean by that is, if a founder is not able to go from renegade founder to renegade leader within their own organization, is this why we see people with the renegade spirit becoming serial entrepreneurs? Because in your case, I mean, you founded 9 companies, some may found 25 or 50 different companies, but is this why? Because it's so hard for people to go from that renegade founder to renegade leader?
Yeah, that's part of it. There's a sadder answer as well, but the majority of that is exactly what you're saying. And it's kind of like you're an inventor of companies, not an entrepreneur. So you've seen or met an inventor who has a million ideas, and they've even made some of them, but they can't really commercialize that, right? So that 0 to 1 entrepreneur founder is almost like a business inventor. And then they realize that next stage is either not fun or that they don't have the skills to do it. And it's a shiny object. I'm just going to go do that. The other reason is that, to go from 0 to 1, there's little barrier to entry, especially nowadays, unless you're doing something super capital intensive. But to go from 1 to 2, is painstaking work that you've got to grind your way through. And some people don't have the gear for that. I don't especially have the gear for that. I would much rather go start something else than figure out everything that has to be figured out in 1 to 2. So I've learned I need a partner in this deal that's really good at that grind from 1 to 2. And that's the only way that I've been able to be more than a company inventor. I'd be hopelessly lost without some of my current and previous partners in that battle. So the other thing is just in that 1 to 2, it's kind of where you're finding that product market fit, the scalability part of that, and the same shiny object syndrome that founders have that created the 0 to 1 is the same tendency that gets them in trouble from the 1 to 2, because instead of finding that sweet little thread that's actually working, they're looking at all the things that aren't working. Then they see the grass is greener and they're like, oh, what if we added that feature? What if we added that product? What if we went to that industry or that niche? And so they're always looking for that magic bullet instead of really working through the details to get them through that breakthrough that they're looking for.
One of my favorite business and leadership books was written by a guy named John C. Maxwell. It was called The Self-Aware Leader. And it's a relatively small book compared to some of his others. So you can read it in a short amount of time. But he talks a lot about the importance of being a self-aware leader. There's another organization I've been involved with on and off through the years called the Table Group, Patrick Lencioni, and his outfit talks about how, when people say, what's the best kind of leader? Well, the answer is a self-aware leader. My question is, generally speaking, what's it like to be on the other side of someone who is a renegade founder and a renegade leader? Because you talked about the importance of having a partner to help you sustain organizations that you come up with, and that without that person, it's impossible to really have that staying power. So what does that partner need to know about about the renegade founder, that kind of points to self-awareness a little bit? Because if you were, again, warning that next person, hey, you're going to come help me partner to build this business and to take this idea from an idea to something that's a mature company, what do they need to know about working with someone that's like you?
Yeah. Man, I feel like we could probably spend an hour in a therapy session talking about this. I think there's so much of it that's just being able to have open, frank conversations about what each of you are bringing to the table. And even, okay, what are we going to need? You and I are about to go start this thing together. I'm going to be the visionary CEO. You're going to be the COO, kind of operator, grinded, so I bring some things, you bring some things, but there's still some holes. So until we can fill those with other people, let's come to an agreement of which of the two of us are going to fill that. So much of this conversation is filled with, and it's the reason we included Tim Spiker's book in Renegades, is because, leadership is primarily about self-leadership first. Who are you? And that's where that self-aware leader that you're talking about comes into play. And so if we're not growing in the person that we want to be at an equal pace to the person that the organization needs to be we're going to feel that tension. And it's not always a perfect 1-for-1, but you go through seasons where like, I gotta adapt. The business has to adapt. And you go through these cycles where hopefully the business is making you better and you're making the business better. So that partnership with the operator, so much of it comes down to both of the leaders showing up with some self-awareness, both showing up inwardly sound and others focused, as Tim Spiker points out, as the key attributes of an exceptional leader. So all those things working together, great communication, shared vision, shared values. Those are kind of the key fundamental attributes to making it really work.
Yeah, you've referenced or alluded to the problem of renegade founders when they hit the wall, when they get to a point where they're just doing more work, or they're working more, I should say, working harder, working more. I'd be foolish to not assume that you're writing this a little bit out of your own autobiography, as in you experienced these things too. Where did it get really bad for you? When did it get the worst before it got better? Like, what were you experiencing?
Yeah. The absolute worst, and I can't remember. I think this is in the book. If it's not, extra bonus here. But the day I got home from the hospital with my firstborn child, I got sent a project from my team that was an absolute disaster. And this was a project for it was a joint promotion between two Fortune 100 companies. So it was kind of a big deal. And it landed on my email to review it. We didn't have Slack at the time. This is back in the day. So it's in my email to review, and it was absolutely nowhere near client ready. And we were supposed to present the next day. So here I am, brand new baby at home, exhausted, brand new mother, and my wife. And I stayed up pulling an all-nighter to absolutely redo this entire project from scratch. And there was a moment, obviously a lot of regret in that time, but it makes you think. And all of the errors of how I got to that moment were so evident of, me trusting in ways I shouldn't have trusted, not trusting team members in ways that I should have trusted. And so that was a big, like, I can't keep this up. I can't have this business interrupt my vacation and my weekend and, late night hours and the birth of my child. And it's not worth it. You create a business for freedom. And then if you're not careful, it becomes the cage for our own prison.
What would you say too? This is a place I'd like to camp out a little bit. What would you say causes most business owners to go from, I'm going to create my own business, not work for someone else, so that I can have more freedom, to the point that you look at their lives and their existence, you're like, you have no freedom at all. Like, what is the biggest contributing factor to it getting to that point, generally speaking?
I think it's really, really different for everybody. I think it's this universal thing that we see over and over and over with the majority of founders, but I think it's all stemming from different reasons. Some of it's daddy issues, some of it's a legitimate need to provide for their family, and they're not at that moment. And so they're going to absolutely put everything that they can into making that true. Some of it's a drug. Our identities get tied to this company, and what's our growth rate and what's our EBITDA and how many employees do we have and what awards did we win? And that can become a drug that you don't even know you're taking until it gets threatened. And so, man, if it gets threatened, you're going to look for that next hit, just like a junkie, and nothing else is getting in the way of you getting that next hit. So I think there's a lot of different reasons for it, but it tends to show up in a lot of people that, they go looking for freedom, and then nobody works harder than that founder. And it looks maybe different than the people that you have making the widgets in the back room, but man, nobody works harder. Nobody's carrying around more weight of that organization than the person who's writing the checks.
Mm-hmm. For founders that are currently in the pit of what we just described, give us the high level of the shifts you think are imperative for those founders to make to get out of the pit and to eventually someday get into the freedom that they're intending to get into.
Yeah, so we break down these 6 shifts in the book, and it's probably too much to talk through all of them. But I'll give you a sense for them. And they start with a rule that, society says that, and then the renegade says, I'm going to do something different. And then you get to the point where that's not working, and you need to shift them just a little bit. It's worth noting that some renegade leaders naturally make these shifts, but usually it's like they make 4 of the 6 shifts and the other 2 are holding them back, or 3 of the 6 shifts and the other 3 are holding back. So some are naturally wired more toward different ones of these, but the first rule of society tells us is play the hand you're dealt. And the renegade says, I'll bet on myself. And then we come along in the subtle shift we need to make. is to teach the organization how to bet. And so that the founder's not making all the bet. And that's the design shift. And we talk about betting with intention, right? So if you think about Vegas, you sit down at the table, you've got a fixed number of chips. Those are your resources. You can put them on, 34 red. I don't even know if 34 is red, 34 red. But there's opportunity costs, because if I put them all there, then I'm not putting any other. So sometimes we split the pile in half or in fours and put it different places. And then the return from that risk better be worth it, right? We need to believe that we're going to get some return for this investment in the resources. And our resources could just be our time, our focus, the humans that we have, the thinking time that we have. All those little things are ways that we can learn to bet with intention. The second one's, the world says, don't quit your day job. Don't quit your day job. And the Renegade says, I'll dance to the beat of my own drum. Right? It's like, it doesn't matter what music you put on. I'm going to go do my thing the way I want to do it. And what we teach in this shift here is to be more like a jazz bassist. So that this is the cadence shift, and the shift is to set the baseline. So in a great jazz, no matter if you have 2 people in a jazz band or 100, that bassist is setting the baseline, and all the improv is happening on top of that. And the baseline sets the cadence, so we kind of know what to expect. So within an organization, most Renegade founders don't have a whole lot of cadence. The cadence comes and goes with their energy and what's most important today. And so there's not a whole lot of predictability, but it's actually dignifying to the people that work around us to give them some consistency. Some people crave consistency, security, routine. So if we can just set the baseline, that gives us lots of room to improvise. So like, hey, we're going to run on quarterly objectives. Hey, we're going to have a weekly team meeting. Hey, we're going to have quarterly coaching. Those sorts of things that become rhythmic within the business. Am I going too fast or too slow through these?
Your perfect pace.
All right. I guess we are going through all of them. So rule number 3 is know what you're getting yourself into. Self-explanatory, but the Renegade says, I'm going to go with my gut. And this is one of the key things that happens when you get into the founder gap is, historically, you do know the right answers. You do know what is going on because you're kind of connected to it, attached to it. And you've got this sense of intuition about what's happening, what's not happening, what needs to happen. But as the organization grows, you get abstracted from some of the layers of the organization. And so your gut is not scalable for the organization. So this shift is the score shift, and it's to know when we're winning. So if we can figure out what our key activities are, our key metrics are, Will, you're responsible for this. This is how we're going to measure it. I used to totally shun that as an entrepreneur because I wanted my organization to be fun and not, bureaucratic and restrictive. And that felt demeaning. And now I'm like, man, that is such a gift of dignity for you to know if you're winning or not in your job. So I myself, this is one that I big time had to go through, is letting the organization, all the teams, the individuals be really clear on what it looks like and to know if they're winning or not. The 4th rule is, culture says, be patient, be patient, be patient, and you just might get lucky. And the Renegade goes, I'm going to make my own luck, right? I'm going to go figure out how to make my own luck. And that works for a while. And then the shift here is the destination shift. So instead of me making my own luck and figuring it out, we need to start with the end in mind. So how do we go out and get really clear on where we're going together and why that matters? That's the big thing that a lot of people leave out. So this destination has 3 critical elements. Where are we going? When are we going to get there, and why? You've heard Simon Sinek. Everybody listening to this has heard Simon Sinek do the start with why. That's exactly on point. the when sets the pace. Because if I say we're going to get to $40 million in 3 years versus we're going to get to $40 million in 10 years, that has implications to the pace we have to go. The decisions, the effort, the capital requirements, it sets the pace for that decision. So that destination shift, starting with the end in mind, working your way backwards, but making sure that you're clear on the purpose. Like, why is this a big enough goal that it creates a big enough story that we can all find a role in the story? Rule number 5, don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. Will, don't make a scene. Benj, don't make a scene. I definitely heard that one growing up. And the Renegades, I gotta be me. I gotta be me. Like, even if I'm not trying to make a scene, but I can't not be me. Right. Well, that works. And most small, founder-led organizations take on the personality of the founder, right? Again, not real scalable. So the ethos shift, the fifth shift, the ethos shift is we got to do we. We go from I got to be me to we got to do we. And so when we go, I got to do we, then we have a sense of clarity of who we are as an organization, like the identity of the organization. One of the things we talk about there is that fitting in is always driven by fear. And standing out is always driven by purpose. And so if we can figure out what we look like when we do we, everybody in the organization gets clear, and it empowers them to make decisions on behalf of the company that are congruent with the identity and character of the organization. And then the last one, rule 6, is almost all encompassing because it actually touches the other 5. That's why we saved it for last. So it's not really a sixth of the equation. It's really like 80% of the equation, but it interweaves with the other 5. And that rule 6, the world says it matters who you work for. What's the number one reason that people leave jobs? Well, they don't like their manager, right? So it really matters who you work for. The Renegade goes, fine, I'll work for myself. Right? That's an easy solution. I can solve that. At least I can control that guy. I might not even like him, but at least I can control him. So I'm going to work for myself. And the people shift says we work together. It's not I work for you, you work for me. It's we work together. And so it starts with engineering the culture that we believe we want to have now and as we grow up. So it can be a little aspirational. We're going to grow into this culture. And it's the place that we believe is going to help people thrive and become the best versions of themselves. And then we talk about the problems are no longer yours to solve as the Renegade leader. You've got other people that are actually better suited to solve some of the problems that you used to have to solve. And then the people aren't yours to lead. We kind of already talked about that. That's our aggressive way of saying that your primary job as a leader is to lead yourself well. And it's about who you show up as and how you can show up for others in any role of influence or leadership. So all of those shifts work together. And there's a underlying thread, I mentioned it a few times, of dignity within each of these. So bet with intention, we're giving the dignity of giving everybody the clarity of what we're trying to do in the organization and how we're going to do it. Set the baseline, the dignity of consistency. Know when you're winning, the dignity of success. Start with the end in mind, the dignity of why this matters. We got to do the dignity of identity. We work together, the dignity of humanity, and remembering that all of this, the reason that my heart beats so hard for entrepreneurs is, one, I've been there and I've been in their shoes. But the bigger drive is the ripples that these renegades make in their communities and the lives of the people that they get to interact with. I don't think there's a better place to work than small business America. And that I don't think there's a better place than small business America to actually grow the people in our community, to impact their families, the philanthropy that happens out of that community impact. So the ripples that have the potential to take place from people getting unstuck as a renegade founder and moving to a renegade leader are infinite.
It's like I said at the beginning, you have a passion to help founders and their teams grow with purpose. And I think you
Yes.
illustrated that there. That was also a great 5-minute commercial for the book. And speaking of the book, where can people get it?
Just Amazon is the easiest, best, maybe only. But type in Renegades and my name, Benj Miller. It'll be your first choice. Otherwise, just type Renegades and you'll get a lot of science fiction.
They will. Um, and System and Soul, which is one of the companies that you founded, your CEO, chief architect for it. You guys help businesses, you help founders, you help coaches, you help leaders. Just in a nutshell, what is System and Soul? What can it mean to a person that's interested in getting involved?
Well, it's our methodology to get unstuck through some of this, whether it's one of the shifts that need to happen in the organization or all six. The false thinking is that for the renegade leader to make all these shifts that they got to do all this work themselves, and they're not actually usually the best person suited to make all these shifts. And so what part of the work we do is getting in there, identifying what we have to do, but employing other people from the organization or outside the organization to help some of these things make sense. So it's our operating framework for helping leaders break through to get what they want most out of their business.
And systemandsoul.com. So it's the word system spelled out the word and soul, SOUL.com is where you can find out more about that. Hey, thanks for the work that you do. One of the reasons I'm committed to this interview series is, again, the name of my book is called Make Work Better. And I'm interviewing people that I think their works are going to help make work better. And you've been doing that for a long time. This book is just the latest effort to help make workplaces better. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for all that you do. And we should do this again sometime.
Yeah. I always enjoy our conversations. So anytime.